The air was heavy and still, like the jungle itself was holding its breath. Tall black trees stretched toward the dark red sky, their sharp leaves trembling from a distant sound. Then it came, the roar. It tore through the air like a blade, deep and thunderous. Shaking the ground beneath everyone's feet, soldiers froze where they stood. Some dropped their weapons, others turned pale. The roar didn't sound like any animal. It sounded like something older than war itself, something that remembered every soul it had ever crushed. Commander Ral's voice cracked through the comms. "Fall back, everyone, now!" But his soldiers didn't move. Their boots sank into the wet ground, hearts pounding like drums in a storm. The roar came again, louder, closer. A few soldiers started to run, pushing past each other, breathing fast, screaming to get away, but one figure didn't move. The human stood alone at the center of the clearing, rain dripping down his armor. His helmet visor glowed faint blue in the dark. He didn't flinch when the roar echoed again. His voice came out calm, almost too quiet for the others to hear. "It's here!" Commander Ral shouted at him through the comms. "Damn it, get out of there, it's a death trap." But the human didn't respond. He took one slow step forward, his boots sinking into the mud. Branches snapped, the jungle shifted, and something massive moved in the shadows. Golden eyes flashed between the trees, huge, round, and burning like suns. The creature was bigger than anything they had ever faced, its claws slicing through tree trunks like paper. It moved with a terrible grace, slow and silent until it wanted to be heard. Then it roared again, and the world itself seemed to bend beneath the sound. Pull back now!" a soldier screamed. But the human lifted one hand not to fight, but to signal silence. The soldiers stopped, their fear mixed with confusion. No one had ever faced the predator and lived. No one had ever stood this close. "What the hell is he doing?" someone whispered through the channel. The creature stepped out of the jungle. Its body was covered in thick black scales, its chest rising like a mountain with every breath. Razor teeth glistened in the dark. It lowered its massive head, staring straight at the human. The ground shook beneath its weight. "You're not supposed to be here," the commander's voice shook now, not with anger but fear. "This isn't bravery, it's suicide." But the human whispered something too low for anyone else to hear. The predator growled, low and slow, its breath misting the air. It tilted its head, curious, confused, like it expected screaming, running, fear, but saw none. The human took another step closer. His heart raced, but his voice was steady. "I'm not here to run," he said. The alien soldiers behind the trees stared with wide eyes. Some muttered prayers, others shook their heads. This wasn't war anymore. This was something else. The predator let out a long, rumbling sound, a warning that had ended armies. But the human answered not with weapons, not with fire, but with silence. Then something strange happened. The creature didn't charge, it didn't crush him. It lowered its head slightly, like it was listening. The wind shifted. The jungle grew quiet. Even the rain slowed. A spark flickered between monster and man, invisible but real. "Why isn't it attacking?" someone whispered. "What is he saying to it?" No one knew. The human moved closer until he could see his reflection in those golden eyes. A reflection that wasn't fear but strength. Suddenly, the creature opened its jaw wide, the roar building again like a storm ready to break. Soldiers screamed, "He's dead." But just as the roar came, the human raised his voice, not loud but clear. "Enough," he said. The sound cut through the air like a blade through smoke. The predator froze, its jaw still open, but no sound came out. Its massive claws sank into the wet earth as it slowly lowered itself. For the first time, the galaxy's deadliest beast knelt. The commander's voice was a whisper. "What just happened?" The soldiers didn't know whether to cheer or tremble. The human stood tall, rain still falling. Eyes locked on the beast, he hadn't fired a single shot, but something in his voice had broken the monster's rage. "Listen carefully," the human said quietly, turning his head slightly toward the soldiers without looking away from the creature. "This war isn't about power, it's about who refuses to kneel first." The predator blinked slowly, then lowered its head even more. The roar that froze galaxies had been silenced by a single human word. The soldiers who had run were now crawling back, staring at a scene they would never forget. In the heart of the jungle, where fear had always ruled, silence was now stronger than any weapon. The commander's voice finally returned, shaky but firm. "Bring the others back. No one shoots, no one moves. We're witnessing history." The predator did not roar again that night. It only watched as the human stood before it, not prey, not enemy, but something entirely new. And in that quiet, the galaxy itself seemed to lean in and listen. The soldiers returned to camp that night in silence. The jungle around them buzzed with strange life, but no one dared to speak loudly. The roar that had once made them run was now just an echo in their minds. The image of the giant predator kneeling before a single human burned deep in their memory. None of them had ever seen anything like it. They didn't even know if they believed it. Some said it was a trick. Others whispered that the human wasn't human at all. Inside the command tent, the air was hot and tense. Commander Ral slammed his hands on the table. "You don't understand what you've done," he said through clenched teeth. His face was pale, sweat dripping from his brow. "That thing has killed fleets, it has burned cities, and it bowed to you." The human sat across from him, calm, his helmet resting on the table. His eyes were sharp, cold, like he had seen this moment before. "I didn't make it bow," he said softly. "It chose." Ral leaned forward. "Creatures like that don't choose. They destroy," the soldiers around the tent murmured, some nodding, some shaking their heads. "Then maybe it saw something it didn't understand," the human replied. His voice was steady, no hint of pride, no fear. "Maybe it saw that we weren't like the others." Outside, the jungle was too quiet. No bird calls, no rustling leaves. It was as if the predator's silence had spread. One of the soldiers, a young alien recruit with silver skin, whispered, "I can still feel it watching." Ral turned sharply. "What did you say?" the recruit swallowed. "I think it's still out there near the tree line." It never left. Ral stormed out of the tent. Pushing past the soldiers, the human followed, silent but alert. The night sky was painted with dark clouds and pale stars, and beyond the camp's lights stood the black wall of the jungle. A shadow moved, slow and deliberate. It wasn't hiding, it wanted them to see it. "It's not attacking," whispered one of the guards. "Why isn't it attacking?" The human stepped forward, stopping just at the edge of the light, his breath fogged in the cold air. "Because it's waiting," he said. The predator stood tall, its golden eyes glowing like two burning suns. Its massive chest rose and fell, but there was no sound, no growl. It was quiet, too quiet for something built to kill. The soldiers raised their weapons, but didn't fire. The human lifted his hands slowly, signaling them to hold. Ral whispered, "This isn't right, this is a predator. It's a monster." The human didn't look back. "Monsters don't kneel," he said. "But they follow." The creature lowered itself, moving closer, but not like a hunter stalking prey. It walked like something searching for a path it didn't understand. The soldiers stepped back in fear, one stumbling into a supply crate. The sound echoed through the night, sharp and sudden. The predator snapped its head in that direction, and for a heartbeat, everyone thought they were about to die. Then the human spoke, his voice cut through the cold like a blade. "Stop," he said clearly. The predator froze again. It looked at him, not with rage, but with something strange, something almost like recognition. Ral's voice shook. "Why is it listening to you?" The human finally turned to face him, his eyes unreadable. "Because I'm not afraid of it," he said. "And it has never seen that before." The soldiers began to lower their weapons, their hands still shaking. Some wanted to run, some wanted to believe. The human took a step closer to the beast, then another. The creature's breath washed over him like hot smoke. Its head tilted down, their eyes locking again. "It shouldn't be possible," whispered the recruit. "This thing is death itself." The human smiled faintly. "Then maybe death has been waiting too long." For a tense minute, nothing moved. Then, with slow grace, the predator turned its massive body and sat down near the edge of the camp. Like a guardian taking its place beside a king it didn't understand. The soldiers gasped, some stepped back. Some stepped forward, Commander Ral whispered. Dear stars. The human didn't say anything. He just walked past the soldiers and stopped a few feet away from the creature. Its golden eyes followed his every move. Why is it here? Ral finally asked. His voice almost a breath. The human glanced at him. Because something worse is coming. Those words hung in the air like smoke. Thick and heavy. The soldiers shifted uneasily. Worse than that, one of them muttered. Looking at the creature, the human nodded. It's not the hunter anymore, he said. It's the warning. A cold wind blew through the jungle, and for the first time since the roar, the soldiers realized the night wasn't silent anymore. Far beyond the dark trees, another sound echoed, low and distant, not one roar, but many. Rel's face turned pale. There are more? The human's expression didn't change, but his voice was firm. Yes, he said quietly. And they're not coming to kneel. The predator's ears twitched. Its golden eyes narrowed toward the darkness. It didn't look like a monster now. It looked like something ready to fight. The soldiers tightened their grips on their weapons, breaths sharp, hearts racing. In the distance, the jungle began to shake, leaves falling like rain, trees bending. The human stood tall, staring into the black. Get ready, he whispered. And for the first time, the soldiers understood. The real terror had not arrived yet. This was only the beginning. The night deepened and the jungle grew louder. It started as a faint tremor in the ground, like distant thunder rolling beneath their feet. Then came the sound, low and rough. A chorus of growls and roars that made the air shake. The soldiers gathered near the campfire, their faces pale, hands tight on their weapons. They all knew what it meant. More predators were coming. The first predator, the one that had bowed to the human, stood at the tree line like a black wall of muscle and claws. Its golden eyes were locked on the darkness ahead. Its tail slowly moved from side to side, tense, ready. The human stood a few steps in front of it, calm but alert. He could feel the vibration under the earth, like something massive was approaching. Commander Ral grabbed his arm. We need to fall back, he said. We can't fight more than one. We'll be slaughtered. The human didn't move. His eyes stayed on the jungle. If we run, he said softly, they'll hunt us down before we reach the next ridge. Ral's face hardened. Then what's your plan? Make them all kneel. The jungle shifted again. Shadows moved between the trees. Dozens of golden eyes appeared in the dark, blinking like stars made of fire. The soldiers stepped back instinctively. One of them whispered, There are too many. The human clenched his fists. He could feel the fear spreading through the camp like smoke. The creature beside him growled, a sound deep and powerful. It wasn't aimed at the soldiers this time. It was aimed at the darkness. The others growled back, and for a moment, the air was filled with the sound of beasts preparing to kill. The human took a slow step forward. Stay behind the lights, he said to the soldiers. His voice didn't shake, not even once, Ral hissed. You'll die out there. But the human ignored him. He walked to the very edge of the camp. Where the light ended and the darkness began, the growls grew louder. Closer, leaves crunched, branches snapped, and then the new predators stepped out of the jungle. They were even larger, their scales darker, their jaws lined with razor-sharp teeth. One of them roared, and the force of it knocked a soldier off his feet. The first predator didn't move. It let out a sharp, bark-like sound. Something between a roar and a warning the soldiers didn't understand. But the human did. He slowly raised both hands, showing he had no weapon. The largest of the new predators tilted its head and lowered itself slightly. The others formed a circle around it. The air was thick with danger. One wrong move and everything would burn. Why isn't it attacking? One soldier whispered. Why are they just watching? The human kept his eyes locked on the leader. Because they're waiting for me, he whispered. Ral barked. What do you mean, waiting for you? The human didn't answer. His eyes stayed on the beasts. He took one more step forward, until he was standing between the two sides, the army and the predators. The leader roared, a long, earth-shaking sound. The human didn't step back. He shouted back, not a roar, not a scream, but words. Enough, the leader stopped. The other predators froze. The first predator beside the human growled again, lower this time, almost like it was speaking in its own way. The jungle fell quiet. Even the night insects stopped. The human whispered something low, words no one could quite hear, but the predators reacted. The leader tilted its head and stepped forward. Its claws dug into the earth, its golden eyes locked on his face. The soldiers raised their rifles in panic, but the human lifted one hand behind his back. "Don't shoot," he said, calm but sharp. The leader stopped just a few feet from him, its breath hot against his face. It opened its massive jaw, and everyone thought the end had come, but then it closed it slowly and lowered its head. What is happening?" Ral breathed, his voice shaking. The first predator moved closer too, standing beside the human facing the pack. It let out another deep sound. This one softer, the others began to shift. Restless, uneasy, the leader lifted its head again, and for the first time, it didn't look like a monster. It looked like something making a choice. The human lowered his hand. His heartbeat was pounding in his ears, but his voice was steady. "This is not their hunt," he said. "They're running too," Ral frowned. "Running from what?" But before the human could answer, the ground beneath them shook violently. Much stronger this time, trees cracked in the distance. Animals scattered through the jungle. The predators turned their heads sharply toward the horizon, their growls changing to something closer to fear. The human's eyes narrowed. He could feel it too. Something else was out there, bigger, heavier, not like them. "They're not here to fight us," he said quietly. "They're here to survive." The leader let out one final roar, but it wasn't a threat anymore. It was a warning. The predators began to move, not toward the soldiers, but away from the jungle's heart. The first predator turned its golden eyes toward the human one last time. Then it followed the pack into the darkness, disappearing as fast as they came. The camp was silent except for the wind. The soldiers looked at each other in shock. Ral whispered, "If those things are running, what the hell are they running from?" The human didn't answer. He stared at the black horizon, where the trees were falling one by one. And in that silence, something far away roared, louder than anything they had heard before. It wasn't the sound of a beast hunting. It was the sound of a world about to change. The camp sat under a blood-red sky, the jungle stretching before it like a black ocean. The predators were gone, swallowed by the dark. But their absence didn't bring peace. It brought something worse, silence. It was the kind of silence that made every soldier's pulse feel too loud, like the air itself was waiting for something to break. The ground still trembled from far away, soft and steady, like the footsteps of something too big to imagine. The soldiers gathered around the command tent, whispering in short, nervous breaths. "They were afraid," one of them muttered. "If those monsters ran, what chance do we have?" Another soldier clenched his weapon tighter. "We should have followed them." Commander Ral paced back and forth, his face tight with frustration. "We don't run," he said sharply. "We find out what we're dealing with and we hold this ground." But even he couldn't keep the fear from cracking through his voice. He turned to the human, who stood quietly at the edge of the firelight, staring into the trees. "You knew this was coming," Ral said. "Didn't you?" The human didn't answer at first, his eyes narrowed, following the slow movement of shadows between the trees. "I didn't know what," he said softly. "Only that something bigger was behind those predators." Ral slammed his fist on the metal table. "Bigger," he hissed. "They already broke fleets, and you're telling me something bigger is out there." The human's voice was low but firm. "Yes," a branch snapped deep in the jungle. The soldiers went still, weapons raising in unison. The lights around the camp flickered, as if something heavy was moving beneath the ground. The tremors grew stronger, the wind shifted, and a cold wave of air rolled through the camp like the breath of a giant. "It's here," the human whispered. The soldiers moved into position. Fingers on the triggers, hearts raced, sweat dripped down temples. The darkness ahead seemed to breathe. Something massive lurking just out of sight. The sound came next, a low, deep rumble that shook the earth like thunder trapped underground. Then it stepped into view. At first it didn't even look real. Its body towered above the trees, its skin a jagged black shell that seemed to absorb the light. Rows of teeth as long as swords gleamed in its jaw. Its eyes burned brighter than fire. But what made the soldiers freeze wasn't its size. It was the sound. It wasn't roaring like the predators. It was whispering, a low, strange hum that crawled into their bones. Ral's voice cracked. "What? What is that?" No one answered. The creature lowered its head. Sniffing the air, the wind shifted again, and several soldiers stepped back without even thinking. The creature let out a slow growl, and the ground cracked beneath its claws. The human walked forward, every step deliberate. The soldiers shouted after him, "Are you insane? Get back! It'll kill you!" But he didn't stop. His boots sank into the wet soil. The night wrapped around him like a cold hand. The creature tilted its head, watching him like a lion watches a mouse that doesn't run. "You're not like them," the human said quietly. The creature's whispering sound grew louder. Like it was answering, the soldiers couldn't understand it. But the human could feel it deep inside, like the air itself was speaking. The creature let out a roar, not like the predators, but a sound so powerful it made every bone in their bodies shake. Several soldiers dropped their weapons, others fell to their knees. The floodlights around the camp shattered, plunging everything into darkness. For a moment, only the glow of its burning eyes lit the night. Then, from the shadows of the jungle, the predators returned, dozens of them. They surrounded the camp, but didn't attack. Instead, they crouched low, their golden eyes locked on the bigger creature. Growling in unison, the soldiers panicked, but the human raised his voice sharply. "Hold your fire!" Ral hissed through his teeth. "You're out of your mind!" But he didn't give the order to shoot. The human took another step forward, now standing only a few meters from the monster. "You've been hunting them," he said quietly, "but you're not here for war, are you?" The creature's whispering stopped. Its eyes narrowed, and then it spoke. Not in human language, but in a low rumble that felt like thunder rolling through their chests. The human's breath caught. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the meaning. It was not a hunt. It was claiming something. "It's not just a predator," the human whispered. "It's the apex." Ral gritted his teeth. "Then we're dead." "No," the human said. "Not if it listens." The monster lowered its massive head closer to the ground, its eyes glowing inches away from him. He didn't move, didn't breathe. His heart beat so loud he could hear it echo. "You want the jungle," he said softly. "Take it." The creature let out a sharp growl that made the air split. The predators behind it stepped back, ears flat. For a long moment no one moved. Then the giant turned away, pushing through the trees. The sound of its body moving through the forest was like thunder rolling away into the distance. The predators didn't attack. They followed their apex into the darkness. Leaving the camp untouched, the soldiers stood frozen, unsure if they were alive or dreaming. Ral's voice came out rough. "Why did it leave?" The human stared at the broken tree line, his voice low. "Because we're not its enemy." The night slowly returned to its strange quiet. But it wasn't the same silence as before. It was heavier, sharper, a silence that carried a warning. The soldiers looked at the jungle, knowing the real danger wasn't over. It had only chosen to walk away. For now, the night after the monster vanished was heavy with unease. The soldiers didn't sleep. They sat in silence, listening to the jungle breathe around them. Every rustle of leaves, every distant howl, made their hands tighten on their weapons. No one trusted the quiet, not after what they had seen. The predators had followed the apex creature back into the jungle, but everyone knew that silence like this meant something was waiting. Commander Ral stood at the edge of the camp, his eyes locked on the tree line. His jaw was tight, and sweat ran down his temple despite the cool air. "It's not over," he muttered. The human stood beside him, his expression calm but focused. "No," he replied softly. "It's not." Ral turned to him sharply. "Why didn't it kill us?" he asked. "Why walk away if it's as dangerous as you say?" The human didn't answer right away. His eyes searched the black wall of trees. "Because it got what it came for," he finally said, "and because we aren't its target." A soft tremor ran through the ground again. It wasn't as strong as before, but it was enough to make everyone's heads turn. A soldier whispered, "Is it coming back?" The human shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "Something else is." Ral frowned. "Something else." But before he could say more, one of the lookouts shouted from the tower, "Movement in the jungle." Lights swung toward the trees. The night shimmered with a thick mist, shapes moving just out of sight. Not predators, not soldiers, something different. The soldiers raised their rifles, hearts pounding. Ral shouted, "Hold your positions!" The human stepped forward, feeling a strange cold crawl up his spine. The mist wasn't natural. It carried a smell, metal, burnt air, and something sharp. Then they appeared, shadows sliding out of the fog, not beasts this time, but machines. Tall and thin, their frames gleaming like knives under the faint light. Their faces had no eyes, only smooth metal plates that reflected the camp like a mirror. "What the hell is that?" a soldier breathed. The human's face hardened. "Hunters," he said. The machines moved in silence. No growls, no footsteps, only the soft hiss of metal against earth. The predators had run, not because of the apex creature, but because of these. The human clenched his jaw. "They're not alive," he whispered. "But they're worse," Ral barked orders. "Form a perimeter. No one fires until I say so." The soldiers formed tight lines, their breaths loud in the dark. The machines stopped just outside the light, standing perfectly still, like statues waiting for a signal. One of them raised a long, blade-like arm, and the others copied the movement. The human stepped closer, his hand hovering near his weapon but not drawing it yet. "They're not here for the camp," he muttered. Ral glanced at him sharply. "Then what are they here for?" A piercing sound sliced through the air, a high, sharp tone that made the soldiers cover their ears. The lights flickered, and the mist thickened. One machine broke away from the group. Stepping forward, its head tilted as if scanning them. Then it spoke, not with words, but with a sound that echoed like metal grinding on metal. The humans stared at it, realizing it wasn't talking to them. It was calling something. And then, from deep in the jungle, another roar answered. Not the predator, not the apex. Something else, something older. The ground cracked under the force of the sound. The machines began to spread out, forming a line around the camp. Ral shouted, "We're surrounded!" Panic ran through the soldiers like fire. The human raised his voice sharply. "Hold!" he barked. "If you shoot, you'll bring it here faster." "What is it?" Ral demanded. The human looked him dead in the eyes. The real threat. The machines began to move closer, their metal limbs sliding across the ground like blades through silk. One of them lunged at the outer wall, tearing through steel like paper. The soldiers opened fire. Gunshots cracked through the night. Sparks flew from the machine's body, but it didn't fall. "They don't break easy," the human shouted, pulling his own weapon and firing at the glowing joints in its limbs. It stumbled, not dead, but slowed. "Aim for the joints," he yelled. "Don't waste shots on the armor." The camp exploded into chaos. Bullets tore through the air. Sparks and smoke filled the night. One machine fell, then two, but more kept coming. Their silent, cold advance was worse than any roar. Through the chaos, the human caught a glimpse of something moving beyond the fog. A shadow bigger than all the machines. He felt the tremor under his boots, the same deep rhythm they had felt before. The soldiers didn't see it yet, but he knew. "They're not the enemy." He whispered to himself. "They're scouts," Ral shouted over the gunfire. "We're not going to make it." The human's voice cut through the noise. "We will," he said sharply, "but we need to move now." He pointed toward the old communication tower behind the camp. "That tower can still reach the outer defense grid," he said. "If we light it up, someone will come." Ral stared at him, then at the endless wave of machines. "And if they don't," the human reloaded, his eyes burning, "then we make them come." The soldiers pulled back toward the tower, fighting every inch of the way. The machines followed like shadows, relentless and silent. The human was the last to fall back, turning only once to stare into the fog. The shadow on the other side moved again. Slow and massive, this wasn't the end of the fight. It was only the beginning, and somewhere out there, the apex creature had vanished into the dark, not running but waiting. The human knew it, and whatever was coming next would decide who would rule the jungle, and who would burn. The tower loomed over the camp like a broken sentinel, its metal frame half-rusted, its lights dead for years. Smoke rose from the battlefield, thick and black. Machines advanced through the fog like a cold wave, silent, merciless, and endless. Every step they took made the ground tremble. The soldiers gathered near the base of the tower, breathing hard, hands shaking around their rifles. Commander Ral's voice was rough. "This is it," he muttered. "Either we make that tower speak, or we die here." The human stood at the front, his armor scratched and streaked with dirt. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with a quiet fire. "They're closing in fast," a soldier shouted. "They're already past the fences." The human glanced at the tree line where the fog churned like a storm. He could feel it. The shadow behind the machines was still out there, waiting to appear. "We have one chance," he said firmly. "Light the signal. Bring the defense fleet." Ral grabbed his arm. "And if no one answers—" The human's jaw tightened. "Then we make our own ending." Gunfire split the air. Machines crashed through the outer barriers like they were made of paper. Their metal limbs gleamed in the red emergency lights. One machine leapt onto a guard tower and ripped it apart with a single strike. Soldiers fired desperately, but for every machine they took down, 2 more stepped out of the fog. "Cover the tower," the human shouted. He sprinted toward the control panel near the base, bullets and sparks lighting the night around him. The old power core hummed weakly, its cables shaking from the surge of energy. "It's dead," a technician cried. "We can't bring it online." The human slammed his hand on the console. "We don't need full power," he said. "Just one shot strong enough to reach the fleet." He grabbed the emergency bypass cables, sparks burning his gloves. "Connect these to the pulse core." The technician hesitated. "That could fry everything." "Exactly," the human said, "but they'll hear us." Another explosion ripped through the night as a machine tore through the west wall. Ral shouted orders, his voice raw. "Hold the line!" The soldiers fought like trapped wolves, firing until their weapons overheated. The ground was littered with sparks, broken armor, and smoke. Then a new sound rolled through the battlefield, a deep, shaking roar that made everyone freeze. It came from the fog, from the jungle. It wasn't a machine, it was something alive. The soldiers turned their heads slowly, hearts pounding. The fog split like a curtain, and the apex creature stepped out. Its massive black frame moved like a living shadow, golden eyes burning with rage. The machines turned their heads toward it in unison. Their formation shifted. They recognized a threat. The apex roared again, louder, shaking the tower itself. "Why is it here?" Ral gasped. The human didn't look up from the cables. "Because it doesn't want them here either," he said. The apex charged into the machines like a storm. Its claws tore through steel, ripping them apart one by one. Sparks flew as metal met flesh. The soldiers stared in stunned silence as the creature fought not against them, but for them. "Move!" the human shouted, snapping them out of it. "This is our chance." He yanked the final cable into place. The tower lights flickered weakly. The pulse core screamed to life, power building fast. "We've got one shot," he said. "And if this fails, we're done," Ral barked. "Then make it count." The apex slammed its massive tail into a line of machines, sending them crashing into the jungle, but more poured from the fog. Surrounding it, they climbed its back, stabbed their blades into its hide, and the creature roared in pain. "Come on," the human whispered. Sweat pouring down his face, he slammed the switch. The tower exploded with light. A beam shot into the night sky, cutting through the clouds like a blade. The air crackled with energy. The machines stopped for a split second, as if they sensed something had changed. A moment later, the roar of engines echoed in the distance. Ral looked up, his eyes wide. "They're coming," he breathed. The defense fleet had heard the signal. The Apex fell to one knee, blood pouring from its wounds, but it still fought, tearing through any machine that came close. It wasn't their friend, but it wasn't their enemy either. The sky lit up as the first wave of fleet drones screamed through the clouds, missiles locking on targets. Explosions shook the ground, tearing machines apart in bursts of light and fire. The soldiers cheered, a sound filled with both fear and hope. Ral shouted over the noise, "Push forward!" The human raised his rifle and joined the line. Firing into the fog, their bullets no longer felt useless. This time, they weren't alone. The Apex roared one final time, its voice echoing across the burning jungle. The machines began to fall back, retreating into the mist like shadows fading with the night. The ground was covered in broken steel, glowing cores and smoke. As the battle slowed, Ral limped toward the human, breathing hard. "We made it," he said, his voice half disbelief. The human's eyes followed the Apex, which stood at the tree line, wounded but unbroken. For a moment, their eyes met again, golden against human. No words, only understanding. Then the creature turned away, disappearing into the jungle as quietly as it had come. The human whispered, "It's not over." Ral frowned. "What do you mean?" The human looked up at the fading fog. "Because whatever made those machines is still out there." The wind carried the smell of smoke and blood across the battlefield. The night wasn't silent anymore, but something in the air told them it would return. The soldiers stared at the dark jungle, knowing they had only survived the first wave. The real war had just begun.